Alright, we've begun Triad Wars 3, which I am excited about. It's the next tournament. Triad Wars 2 is not complete yet, but the semifinals should be rolling out in video form about the same time as this round 1 starts out. I'm not going to do all of round 1 today because that would be a long video and my voice doesn't feel great. Excuse me. But hopefully, I think we'll get halfway through 4 of the 8 human players' games, and then we'll do the other 4 next time. So, in addition to the 4 participants we had for Triad Wars 2, in alphabetical order, Bren, Delial, Piggyman, and Turds, we have a new 4 in Chickeny, Dalamar, Tuzuka, and Wavy. I'm always excited to see more players, and all of these are players I never got to see a lot of their play, so I'm just excited to see style and, the kind of decisions they make and what their reasoning is. Each player is going to be in their own section, so each has their own eighth of the bracket, meaning their first 3 opponents will be AIs, and only if they make it through those AIs will they face other human opponents. I think it's really fun to get human games on the record. I'm really excited about the semifinals in Triad Wars 2, but it is a pain to organize and get human versus human matchups. They have to both be online at the same time. I have to be there. It's a struggle. It's much easier for people to be able to play through AI. They can just send me the moves whenever they get to it. So there are real benefits to having matches versus AIs. I do also think AIs are interesting for practice and testing of ideas, and hopefully we're going to keep not just improving them, but adjusting them to make them play in more human ways, so they're opponents where you can really see different ideas and how they work. Per usual, difficulty is going to scale up each round. So the first round is going to be, theoretically at least, the easiest of the rounds. This doesn't always come about, but theoretically. And each round will have a more difficult opponent than the last. But each is going to have some variation in who they're playing, exactly what that opponent values. So it's not like everyone will have the same opponent. I only did have 4 AIs set up for this difficulty, and we had 8 players. So actually, each of the AIs faces 2 of the humans. So if you wanted, you could try to figure out which 2 humans were paired with the same AI each time. You could look at their play and think, this play looks similar to that play against that other game I saw. These 2 humans probably hit the same opponent. And maybe you'll get it right. But there's some variation in the styles here. Because each AI, the best AIs must be met in round 3, the toughest AI here will be met before the quarterfinal stage, because we have 8 humans and I wanted to leave ground for all the humans to play each other, should they make it. And this is also the first tournament where throughout the whole tournament the AI moves will be fully automated, will all be played by a computer rather than me following a list of rules and trying to figure it out, and sometimes getting it wrong. It does reduce the amount of different things the AI can do, because it is limited to stuff we were able to program rather than stuff that I intuitively understand but I'm not sure how to vocalize. And so this is going to slightly reduce the amount of different things our AI can do, but it also gets us much closer to having, a playable game and stuff that could be used on people's own. So our first game, I'm going to show the games in order of when they were played. Our first is everyone's best friend Dalamar taking on Melbourne in Triad Wars 3, round 1. So Dalamar goes first. All the humans are going to get the same first-second turn order, so all of them here will have first turn in game 1, and should it go to a second game, I will say in advance, they get second turn in game 2. It's not necessarily going to be the case that, if you get first turn one game, you'll always have second turn the next. It's going to be random. That's just how it worked out here. All humans will be in blue, except when they play each other, when one has to be red. So here you can see Dalamar's hand on the right. Very interesting hand. There's his opening synergy, which if we go ahead and move, we can see he plays 9-5, 9-5, and 4, ready for 7-8, 7-6 to plus wall it back from either 1 or 7, though 9-4, A6 also has a plus or same wall in both 4 or 7. 8-6, 7-8 has a plus wall in one of those squares, and 4A, 5-9 has a plus wall in the other. So his whole hand is really oriented towards being able to take this back. And it's an interesting starter type, because with value facing towards the corners, often the opponent kind of can't slide safely next to it, right? If they played something like Celis in 1, or say Celis, so Celis in 1, Dalamar can take in 2. Celis in 7, Dalamar can't take, but it does flip the card in 4, and Dalamar would have the potential to combo back. But even if Celis in 7, Celis's 6A85, didn't flip the card in 4, if it was flipped at some later point, Dalamar's hand is ready to combo it back at some point from 1 and play around it effectively. So it's an interesting kind of starter, not one I personally messed around with much. I also think it's fundamentally an interesting hand. He has 3 cards that are just clearly not corner cards, are either up, down, or side to side cards, horizontal verticals, in 9595, 94A6, and 4A59, which is definitely going to make this one of, if not the most original hands we see in this round. And the only card you could even really argue as much of a corner is 8678, but I would call 8678 and 7876 utility cards. So I would say this is a hand without a single corner card in it. And Dalamar did mention he thinks the site championships were his best tournament, not because of the closed, but because they had far more restrictive stipulations, and he doesn't like using standard power cards. And you can see here, 8876 is a very strong card, but he's not using any of the big corners. He's using verticals and horizontals and less traditionally used cards that were more effective the more stipulations there were, so the fewer power cards his opponents had access to. So I thought this was all quite interesting. His opponent replies with a corner in 3, which I was interesting to see the response to because the hand is so oriented to doing stuff around the starter that seeing any move distant, you suddenly, have to figure out a new kind of strategy and which squares are you going to leave open and which are you going to close off. And I think Dalamar's move made a lot of sense in 5. I think this does a few interesting things. One is, he is obviously well set up for 1 and 7, but he is not necessarily well set to play off his starter in 5, so he immediately blocks the square that his setups have least access to. And what's more, he blocks off doing 2 other things that I think are really neat and important. One is, whenever you set up what I call a J setup, if the cards were in 2, 5, and 8, it would be easy to see the J, and we can just rotate it to get this setup and flip it as well. But in this J setup, the game is going to be directed very horizontally and not vertically. And with Dalamar's first 2 moves, he has gotten his 2 horizontal cards out of the hand, which I really liked conceptually as a way to play the hand. You're orienting the game a particular way, and you're making sure your remaining cards can handle that. Another thing I really like is Dalamar has given up no safety to his opponent. They have no safe moves in 1, they have no safe moves in 2. 8678 really covers both those squares against 10s. They have no safe move in 7, they have no safe move in 6. So he's given them no safe options, and he's used up the cards that don't have power relevant to the rest of the game, and he set up his 7876 to potentially have another combo square in 8 to go along with 1 and 7. So I thought this move was very logical and strong. The opposing AI, I think, made what looks to be a really weak-looking move here. It doesn't seem to accomplish anything, so I want to sort of quickly say why it might think a move like this is good, because a bunch of my AIs make this move, and I think, or make moves of this type in 8 in this kind of setup, and I think it looks pretty suspicious, but the one logic to it that makes some sense at least is, if I have no safety myself, any move I play is going to be surrendering you safety, right? If I go in 7, you can go in 8 and lock in my card in 7. If I go in 1, you can go in 2 and lock in maybe both the cards in 1 and 2. Now here maybe they should have looked there because there's some combo potential using the cards in 4 and 5. But you can see why those moves might not be appealing, and really any move is going to give up something in this kind of setup. And this move at least is one that the AI can easily recapture whenever it is taken. So that's sort of the concept behind the move. Dalamar played in 7. He specifically mentioned here that he thought it was important to hold on to the other 2. And again, this makes a ton of sense. The 4A59 is going to be the best side-to-side sweeper up top, and can plus wall both of those 9s facing up if needed. And the 8678 does a really good job of controlling A's on the top row, and does a really good job of controlling the square 9, because it can plus any card in 9 from 6. So I think this is just a winning position now for Dalamar. The AI plays in 2. Dal does not flip it, just keeps his good card for, 4A59 was good in 1 and 2, 8678 is good in 6 and 9, and plays out nicely for a 7-3 win, and is the first to advance to round 2. And I think a nice game with a very peculiar hand to my eyes, just very much not the standard hand. Again, no corner cards, but plays it really convincingly here. The AI moves do not look strong, but that doesn't really... It doesn't... Even though the AI's move in 3 looks a little weird, it didn't make Dalamar's move obvious at all, I don't think. The move in 8, kind of weak, had some logic to it, but it also wasn't at all obvious where they should go. He did not give them clear paths, and I think very nicely handled the game to start the tournament with, as I said, a really peculiar hand. So we now move on to game 2, Delial versus Charizard. Deli goes first. Deli is the hand on the right. Deli really likes FF8 and tends to play FF8 only hands. If you've watched the semi-final of Delial vs. Turds, if you've watched any of that, you'll notice I mentioned that he really likes FF8, and we all thought he'd be playing with that there, and perhaps you'll see if he still will, because you've probably... I think this will be coming out after game 1 of that, which means you'll have only seen the him using an FF7 hand. He may still use an FF8 hand in the future. And he also... Yeah, so he's big FF8 guy, and has used this hand in actual games on TTA. And has bragged to me that it is a very effective hand, and I should try it out and just see how strong it is. It just creates a lot. And you can see, obviously, Squall and Cipher play really well together, but Kyros is a really nice combination with them playing off both their 6s, playing off Squall's 9, often a setup card. You can see how things like Squall in 5 and Adia in 7 set up Kyros really nicely, slightly less expected synergies like that. Because if Squall and Cipher work well with Kyros using the wall rules, same wall or plus wall, then they're going to work just as well with Kyros and Adia, which effectively adds those same 10s that walls have facing out further into the board. And Irvine fills out the hand, gives a 4th corner. This is not a no-corner hand, this is an all-corner hand except for Kyros, which is a very nice utility card. So Delial starts with Irvine in 3, keeping the cards with more synergy still in the hand. I think something you'll notice watching Delial games is he often tries to find the most effective way to use what he considers the weakest card in his hand. And so when he starts with something, it is often should be telling that Delial has evaluated, based on looking at your hand, that this is the card with the worst play. And so where some people see hands that start in 5 as like, I'm going to start with Squall or Cipher in 5, and then I'm going to play around it, which Delial will certainly do. I think, and I might be wrong about this, but I think more often, if he thinks Squall and Cipher are going to be good, he can keep them and set up with them later. He'll find time and ways to do so. So the AI just captures, which is an interesting reply because Delial does not have a way that necessarily locks in forever. Squall can be same-walled back, though Squall does set up Cipher 2 ways. I think Squall was one of the moves he was looking at. Delial mentioned here that he had kind of 3 ideas. He had the normal move, which was to recapture in 6. I don't remember if he was saying Squall or Adia for 6. Both make some sense. He had the defensive move, Cipher in 1, and he had the crazy move, which was something in 4. I think Kyros in 4, setting up Squall for both 1 and 5. But it's not really that much of a setup, and he ended up discarding that one pretty quickly. And to my surprise, went for the defensive option in 1. And he, at this point, bet me a lot of money the AI would play Kate Sith in 5, setting up the plus in 4, as well as a same wall or a plus in 6. And a plus and a same wall in 8. And Delial was thinking he's pretty sure he had a good way to handle that, but we never got to see what it was because the AI went for the L, which also makes a lot of sense, setting up a same in 5, a same wall in 9. It looks like a pretty desirable L, though I think Deli had this pretty well understood. He blocks 5, says, can't give you that. And even though they have safety in 9, he had calculated this out. Sorry, my throat's going, so I'm going to clear my throat in a sec. Even though they had safety in 9, he had calculated out that the cute move, Adia in 7, was always going to be a comfortable save. And here you can see that Squall, Adia, Kyros combination, where Squall and Kyros play really well with walls, and Adia plays the same as those walls do. And so they combo in 8, and Delial combos back to tie the game 5-5. Our first tie of the tournament, though we will certainly have more. And we go on to game 2, and Delial sticks with his hands, FF8 forever. Charizard goes first, starts with Zidane in 3. Delial had a few different options he liked here. As I recall, he was looking at kind of the obvious Adia in 7, but a couple other options, ends up settling on Squall in 9, which really sets up Kyros for just everywhere. Kyros now has 2, Kyros has 6, Kyros has 8, and none of Charizard's cards really have the same effect. You know, they have 9964 for 6, but doesn't flip both. You know, they have a couple ways to overpower in 2, none of that's very exciting. They can overpower in 8, none of that's very exciting. This is already pretty difficult to defend. Squall in 9, I think a very strong move. And it makes sense to say, okay, you're better in 2, you're better in 6, you're better in 8. I have to get Kyros out of your hand, and B, start blocking some of those squares. So even though Kate Sith in 6 is kind of a messy move to play, as, you know, stuff can be comboed and Deli does combo back, it does make some sense to at least start trying to block some of those squares. And now, at least Zidane is a little safer. It can be flipped by Adia, but maybe there will be play against Adia. But as there's no move in 5, you know, as a player on the L, you really want to threaten 5. There is no threat in 5, so the best thing the AI could see to do was block 2. And here, it looks very good for Deli, but we still got to find the win. So if you want to calculate out, this is a good position to pause, because there is only one winning move. Last chance to pause. Delial does play the win, Adia in 7. And the key point is any card in 5, Delial can either... if they play Rhinoa in 5, they're down 6-4, and Delial can just block 1. If they play Celis in 5, they do flip a lot of things, but importantly, Cipher has the plus wall back, and that ends up being the critical line, and Delial wins 6-4, and advances to the second round, which no one saw coming. Our third player this round was Piggy. Again, this is in the order of who got their games done fastest, so credit to these first 4 as the players who, you know, rushed to play their game. Though actually, I was worried the whole round would be done in like a week, and I would like it to take a little longer for rounds to go, just because I don't want entire tournaments, and, you know, it takes some time for me, because I have to set things up, do graphics, be around. It's nice when it takes a little longer than that, but I was also really grateful that players were so quick and eager to get their games done. So Piggy has the hand on the right. He made a couple comments about his hand. Firstly, he thinks Galoof and Xdeath are a really formidable pair. He's used and written articles about this pair in the past. They have this just extra synergy where they can same wall each other next to each other, but they also have this plus wall potential with the 7 and the 4, as well as just the standard ways that opposites can play off each other. Then he wanted to fill out an A up and down, and Fafnir and Zidane are a very strong pair that does so, and Lulu seemed a nice way to fill out the hand while covering Fafnir and Zidane on the sides that Galoof and Xdeath don't already cover. So he starts with Zidane in 3. Second time we're seeing a Zidane in 3 starter, and the second time we'll be seeing Squall in 9 as the response. And again, this is a really strong response, and this time by the AI. And Piggy said he thought this was really strong and that he was in a bad spot and already looking for ways to kind of get out, because the AI has better play in 8 than he does, which is clearly better with 6-8, 7-8, has better play in 6 with the A3 2A than anything Piggy has, and has really good play in 2, at least as good as Piggy's play. I would say 7-8, 6-8 is probably more comfortable to put there than 7-8, 4A is. So already all the squares look kind of bad, and one instinct would be to start blocking those squares, which we saw ineffectively but reasonably in the last game against Delial. But I think Piggy found a much nicer route and a much cleaner way to handle this, which was to go in 5 and to notice that the AI's hand has not many A's in it. And I think A's are sometimes treated as like, I can take things, but maybe more often they're this defensive power of like, I can put something in a square and it's not going to be comboed back because that A is stronger than whatever's facing it. And you often see like Like, I wasn't a fan of using 8/8s on level 7, but it often gave you saves and defenses that other cards just wouldn't give. Not because the 8/8 corner was necessarily that strong, but just because having so many 8s meant you were so much less vulnerable to being set up on big combos. And if there are a lot of A's on the board and you have no cards left or very few cards left with A's on them, you often, somewhere down the road, some flips are going to start getting uncomfortable where you suddenly have to be very careful about what you flip because everything tumbles afterwards. And I think this is a move that sets it up nicely. First of all, anytime one of X Death or Galoof goes in 5, the other cards set up really well. And second of all, because it sort of forces the AI to now go in 6, because that is such a valuable square, or makes it very tempting to go in 6, especially because Piggy now does have very good setups in 6. Both Fafnir and Lulu are now great in 6, kind of forces the action in 6, and so is going to start blocking those squares Piggy didn't necessarily have, and with a card that will not be safe to later combos, right? Because there are so many A's facing in there. So I thought it was a nice use of a very aggressive center play here. The AI goes with the logical card in 6, and Piggy just takes back the card in 2, with 2, and sets up here. And we sort of have a situation where if the AI goes in 6, then Piggy probably, nothing there's going to be safe, and all of the cards there are sort of vulnerable to potential combos. Not that they really flip anything, but both of Piggy's cards are going to play really well against anything in 8. And the other square for them to go, obviously, the other obvious square for them to go in is 1, but 2 of their 3 cards that go in 1 can just be comboed back immediately. So they go with the other one, and this is a mistake, because actually the key here was to avoid Galoof sweeping the bottom row. And actually, even though both the others could be immediately comboed by Galoof, that is better than allowing Galoof to dominate the bottom row. And both 5996 or 6878 and 1, I believe, are both ties, even though Galoof can combo them. Because after Lulu and 4, Galoof is so dominant down there, the opponent has nothing that can fight against it, and Piggy picks up a comfortable win. And a nice win, I think, because I think he was in trouble after the second move, and really found a way to stabilize with his move in 5, and then with his move in 2 gave serious problems to his opponent, and they sort of made the only obvious play. It locks in a card that wasn't already theirs in 2, and can't be comboed, unlike all the other moves, and yet was a losing move. So I thought nice pressure by Piggy, and a nice way to stabilize a difficult position. He recognized the AI had thrown the tie away, but the AIs are going to do that, and 4 moves left is really hard to calculate. I'm going to do a video about this in a bit, about just calculation, but one thing I want to say about it is, let's say there are 3 moves left in a game, and so that means you have 6 possible moves you can play. There are 3 moves left total in the game, so we're on move 7 of the 9 moves. There are 6 moves you can make, there are 4 possible replies to each, and the last move is forced, meaning there are 24 possible variations left in the game, and there are 6 moves you can make. And so if you take 10 seconds to calculate each of those 6 moves left, or like 2 and a bit seconds to calculate every single one of the 24 variations, it's going to take you about a minute to calculate a position with 3 moves left in it. And some positions that's going to be easier, some it's going to be harder, but that seems pretty fast to me. Like, that's about the speed I've been trying to do it in the videos I make, where I do have to talk while doing it, and that slows down my calculation. But I think there are lots of players who are going to be much slower calculating. So let's say it takes a very good player to be able to reliably calculate 3 moves left in a minute. So how long does it take to calculate 4 moves left? Well, there's 12 moves with 4 moves to go. So that's going to be 12 minutes to brute force calculate everything. That's well past the normal time limit of 5, 7, or 9 minutes. And obviously humans are going to jump to the key moves and figure out proper ideas to be able to calculate quicker. But it is to say, with 4 moves left to brute force everything is quite difficult to do in any kind of normal time limit, and usually most people aren't going to be able to do it. And so making a move that looks normal like this and losing with it is a very common thing to do. So that was a bit of an aside, but something I wanted to babble about. And our 4th game is Tuzuka versus Lynx. Tuzuka is the hand on the right, and Tuzuka wrote me really nicely a lot about this game. So this one, I'm mostly just going to read what he wrote. I'm going to put in some comments because I think otherwise for him, he'll just be hearing his words read back to him, and that might not be so interesting. I really do appreciate hearing lots of commentary, and I wanted to share it. So he says, firstly, this hand was very strongly built around the 5-7-A7, his hand's the blue hand on the right, in 5, and Kyros circling it. So again, we're seeing Kyros really well set to plus wall and same wall off other cards. Here it has one same wall in 4 and a plus wall in both 6 and 8, and can overpower in 2, being able to take it from all surrounding spots and have a potential combo ability in 4, 6, and 8, among other strengths of Kyros. The other cards gave quite well-rounded mixture of support to the central 2 cards, like taking away instant safe spots quite effectively and giving some additional pluses, etc. So that starter move clearly had a very high probability from the get-go. Was pleased to have the first turn, although I stopped for a sec to check the opponent's hand and took some time with it. Checked if there happened to be any unlikely safe corners, etc. Cipher seemed potentially scary, with high ability to plus wall and same wall 6s, and as we've seen, Cipher and Kyros can play very well together, and if one of you is Kyros and the other Cipher, there's going to be a lot of interplay there. And there were also quite a lot of PW ability against 9s, which were kind of prominent in my hand. The 8-A-4-7 had also a scary ability to plus wall same wall my planned starter in 5. Overall, the opponent's hand seemed well-rounded, and it was clear that I would have to be careful with some of the potential combos. Still, went for the high probability starter in 5 relatively quickly, and stopped thinking much further. The opponent could direct the game with the next turn. The one thing I'll add here is I think a lot of 5 starters are built as setup hands, as this is my move in 5, and then I have these potential corner setups after. And Tuzuka is not really organizing the hand that way. There definitely are some corner setups, because cards that are going to play well off your center are often going to naturally have corner synergies with each other, but it's much more built to say, I have cards that can play off that. I don't need specific setups. I'm going to more say, I know Kyros is going to play great no matter what, and then I'm going to make sure you have no corners. I think Tuzuka is the only hand in this round where we'll see he has double numbers facing towards all 4 corners. So it's a center starter designed to have all your corner options covered, and then I'm going to have synergies down the road, mainly using Kyros, but also little ones like the others, like Snow, the 4996, has the plus wall in 4, and there's lots of little mini synergies like that. But it's always interesting to me to see there are some hands built with very explicit synergies, and there are some hands built with little mini synergies, and this is very much in the latter camp. So Tazooka starts in 5, and the opponent goes for their strongest corner in 1. I was kind of glad that Cipher was out on the first turn. As we've learned, Tuzuka was worried that Cipher would play really well off Kyros and maybe Lulu, and tried to think for potential plans. Checked if the opponent could get any safe spots in 2 or 4, but it couldn't. Cipher gave a nice safe for 9-5-9-5 in spot 2, and that same card was the only card able to take Cipher from 4, so didn't even think of using it. Right, if 9-5-5-9 has 2 and 4 is his key card for both those squares, obviously he's going to hold on to it and leave those squares open as long as he can. It was also clear in my mind that I didn't want to use Kyros yet for its multiple uses, so didn't even give it a thought. 4996 was the downward strength of the remaining hand and was potentially needed, and also had potential plus wall combo spots in 2 and 4 for the starter in 5. Right, I mentioned that Snow has synergy in 2, but it also has the plus wall in 4, even if the opponent was currently able to further combo them from 3 or 7. So it appeared clear that Lulu would be played, and I stuck with that, especially since the opponent didn't have A's to the left nor down. Decided to go for a pre-planned simple concept of trying to create potential combo chains with the card in 5 and put Lulu in 6. Went in 6 because going for 8 would have lessened the usability of Kyros, and also the opponent couldn't currently take 5 from 8, not much further clear thoughts. Had taken quite some time until this point, could be some rustiness from not playing a proper high combo full rule set game in quite a while, and honestly didn't think much further for potential replies from the opponent, but was quite confident in the remaining hand's ability to tackle upcoming situations, since I didn't give any clear safe spots for the opponent for now, and kept potential combo actions nicely alive. Yeah, so this is a little reminiscent of a few things. One is I think Tuzuka and Delial have some thinking in common, where both very quickly rule out using whichever cards are most effective, and start looking at the cards that have less immediate use and trying to get them out of the hand, and keeping the most powerful cards for the endgame. And the way they both talk about their moves struck me as reminiscent. And I'm very curious watching their games, and if they watch, this video and see each other's games, if the way the other describes how games work feels similar to what the other would do and how the other thinks. Because just listening to them talk, I think there are some similarities. The second thing this reminded me of is, of course, the Dalamar game we saw, which also had this J setup, and both were very careful to make sure the opponent would have no safe moves, and to make sure they kept the cards that would be critical for the directionality of the game. Right, Kyros plays really well off the starter and is good side to side, so that has to stay. And using up a card that's quite powerful in Lulu, but seeing that it had less play in the resulting directionality of the game. Interesting move from the opponent to go in 7. Honestly, hadn't thought it would do that, but it put some potential complications to the game and gave itself a plus in 4 and a nice plus in 8. T formation was about to be formed, and the first principled instinct was to go for 4. I thought about moves in 4 for a bit, but not all the way through at first, which I should have done. Instead, still wanted to check for other more complicated options and went ahead to do that. That eventually led to some minor pressure when I eventually reverted back to checking for the moves in 4, which I should have done all the way through in the first place. Let's blame rustiness again. So I went through the potential upcoming formations that would follow from playing in 4 with every remaining card, and ended up with 4996, which would make it safe and also gave a win, which I then realized since the opponent couldn't avoid taking 5-7-A7 from 2, and I was well prepared in taking opponent from 3, 9, and also 2 with both cards. 9595 was excellent for both 2 and 8. So he goes in 2, and the opponent plays, interestingly, in 9. Opponent went for probably the most complicated attempt to avoid a loss by playing in 9. Had to double check everything, I still felt a bit paranoid just to make sure, and then put, and I'm going to pause there because this is an interesting position with 3 moves left to solve. When I do put up a calculation video, I think this is a good place to just brute force out calculation and make sure, the win is there and where it is. But Tuzuka does end up finding it, and wins very convincingly with a really elegant move, I think. Kyros in 3, not needing to flip anything, just making sure 9559 would dominate everything. As he mentioned earlier, he knows any move in 2 is going to flip 5, so they can't go in 2 without giving him a big combo in 8, so the only thing they have is 8, and in that case, he still has a very good move in 2, and we know they can't flip the card in 7 without also flipping 5, which again will give Tezuka the big combo. So he says, just to make sure, and then put Kyros in 3, an enjoyable win. Yeah, I thought this one was really elegant. I really liked this one. And so we have a few facts about these games. We saw 2 corner starters, 1 side starter, and 1 center starter. I think all were handled well, except of course Delial was garbage and gave up a tie. Kyros was the most popular card so far, being used twice. We'll see if it remains the most popular card or other cards catch up. And I thought something interesting was there were no A8 corners. There were a lot of A9 corners, there were some A7s. We did see A8s, but they were A7 corners or side-to-side cards in the A7 8-4s that Piggy used. So I thought it was interesting that we didn't see any A8 corners, and I'm going to keep an eye if those come up. We saw 9-9 corners, we saw 8-8 corners, we saw 8-7s. We didn't see any A8s. We didn't see any 9-7s either, but 9-7s are honestly pretty rare. Nanaki is one that sees some play. There's probably some others, but that's the main one I can think of. Gipple, 9767? Is that something? I don't think that's Gipple. That's a card, though. Anyway, point is, those are the 2 corner types I don't think we've seen so far, and we'll see if they come up. I'm always curious what people think are the most powerful cards to use. Though I did hear it mentioned, this is an early round and not the most, not a triple triad advanced tournament, though I hope people are taking this seriously, and so hand building's not going to be quite as serious as it might have been for a TTA tournament. But I think for the most part, players taking this pretty seriously and really trying their best, and I think playing some interesting games. So how'd they do? Well, we got 4 matches, all 4 humans won, though one did give up a tie, Delete, and that's where we're at. So next time we'll get to see Bren, Chickeny, Turds, and Wavy play. Not in that order, they'll be in whatever order they actually played their games. And yeah, excited to see more players this time, really hoping to keep expanding, and excited to see where this tournament goes. Round 2 will be up in a while, but the next video covering the rest of round 1 should be up within a week. And hopefully the games remain interesting and with nice variety, and I thought really comfortably handled. These first round AIs are not the toughest, but that doesn't mean you can't get yourself in a messy position or make mistakes, and I think these were really clean wins all the way through. Again, Deli let the team down. So, that said, the sound got too loud when I fake coughed there, so apologies to any eardrums, and see you next time.